910, a September 11 story. September 10th, 2001, 4:10 p.m., Brooklyn, New York. My Nana's going to be so crazy worried, Sergio said. He looked at the clock hanging on the wall behind the cash register. How had the whole day gone by so fast? It was past 4. Since the accident on the subway, he had been talking for hours, nearly non-stop, to Gideon. Gideon looked at his watch. Wow, you're right. It's late. I didn't realize what time it was. He paid the check and counted out 5 singles from the change. He walked back and laid them on the table where he and Sergio had just finished burgers, fries, and milkshakes. He returned to where Sergio was surveying gum and candy display under the counter while he waited. Want me to call your grandma and explain? Gideon asked. There would be so much to explain. This morning felt like it happened days ago. His dad in the doorway, skipping school, walking the streets, ducking into the subway, jumping the toll, the man bleeding from his head, and Gideon jumping into action. That had been like a movie, but it wasn't a movie, it was real. Sergio would never forget it. Now, when he was trying to remember it in detail, it felt like it had happened forever ago, but it had probably only been a couple of hours. Hey, hold still, Gideon ordered the man who immediately tried to stand up, reaching for the subway pole and missing. Of course, Sergio didn't know Gideon's name yet. Hey, kid, come here. Me? Sergio said. Gideon didn't bother answering that question. Give me your t-shirt. Sergio reflexively looked down at his own body. His hoodie was tied by the arms around his waist. He wore a beater and a v-neck over that. The outer one, the t-shirt! Gideon yelled. Give it to me! Now that the man was sitting upright, the blood ran freely from his head like a freaking river, covering his face in a red mask. My t-shirt? Is this guy kidding? New t-shirts were like gold, especially Ralph Lauren v-necks. They were not easy to come by. If he was lucky, Sergio found a 3-pack at Marshall's. He even washed them by hand to make sure they lasted. Gideon yelled, Now! And this time Sergio obeyed. He tore off his hoodie and pulled his t-shirt over his head and tossed it to the fireman. Can you tell me your name? Gideon spoke calmly to the man as if nothing were unusual at all. At the same time, he folded Sergio's brand new, perfectly white tee into a square and pressed it into the guy's bloody head. The man struggled. My name? Do you know where you are? Gideon asked. The man didn't answer, but he tried to stand again. He seemed totally out of it, losing his balance and nearly toppling over onto his side. His eyes were wide and darkening. His mouth moved, but nothing came out. You're on the subway. Just take a deep breath. Everything's going to be all right. You hit your head. We need to get you to a hospital. The way he spoke, the confidence, the firmness, even the kindness of it, reminded Sergio of something long ago, something he had lost, something that wasn't his, but should have been. Listen, I'm Gideon. I'm a firefighter and a medic. The subway raced through the tunnel and then jerked and hissed to a stop. The doors slid open. Gideon called to Sergio again. Come and help me get him to his feet. We need to call an ambulance. At this point, resistance was futile. Sergio didn't hesitate. Besides, he didn't want to. So with Gideon on one side, still pressing the shirt against the wound, and Sergio on the other, they hoisted the man to his feet and made their way out of the train. The station was crowded with people. Please, everyone, move out of the way, Gideon called out. They stepped in unison across the platform and lowered the man down onto a bench. Like the parting of the Red Sea, everyone moved out of their way. Sergio could feel Gideon's authority, only it wasn't threatening. It was powerful, and it was transferred by their connection. People listened and did what Gideon said, and now Sergio was part of that. Take my mobile phone. Gideon reached into his back pocket. Go up to the street and call 911. Sergio took the phone, and even though he had known the number all his life, he repeated it to himself with every step he took. Emergency. Emergency, please move. Emergency. Sergio imitated the commanding tone that Gideon had in his voice, and people stepped out of the way without question. When he got up to the street, he pressed in the number. 911, what's your emergency? There's a guy who hit his head pretty bad. He's bleeding and seems... Sergio paused. searching for the right word that would be accurate, not hysterical, something urgent and intelligent to bring immediate help. Incoherent. Is he breathing? The disembodied voice asked. I don't know. I think so. I had to come up here to call. Just send an ambulance. Where are you? That's when Sergio realized he had no idea where he was. He looked back at the entrance subway. Bowling Green Station, the uptown platform. Emergency personnel have been dispatched to your location. Can you remain at the scene? Yes. May I have your name, sir? Sergio didn't hesitate. The New York City dispatch wouldn't care if one 12-year-old boy was skipping school anyway. This was more important. This mattered more than he did. Sergio Kincaid Williams, I gotta get back down there. As soon as he entered the station, the police service cut out. Gideon was still at the bench. The man was lying down across it, moaning. Gideon didn't ask Sergio if he had made the call or if he had reached anyone. Gideon assumed he had. He's got a concussion. He's still bleeding, but he'll be okay. Sergio could hear the sirens from the street above. After the ambulance finally arrived, the paramedics came running down the stairs. There seemed to be some kind of brotherhood, some unspoken agreement when they found out Gideon was a firefighter, and now Sergio was included too. Hand me that bag, kid. One of the paramedics was on his knees, reaching out his hand. Sergio lifted the medic bag and passed it over. He felt his heart pumping, adrenaline rocking his body. Only when it was all over, when the paramedics had carried the man up the stairs, strapped to a gurney, the ambulance doors had slammed shut, and the crowd had dispersed, did Sergio pause and remember who he was, where he was, and why. At the same time, it was as if a door had been cracked open, letting in light from the other side, from a hallway he had never seen before. Gideon was pulling off his plastic gloves. He said to Sergio, Guess I owe you a new t-shirt. They stood on the street, facing the direction the ambulance had driven, the sound of the siren wailing in the distance. Nah, it's okay, Sergio said. Sergio didn't really care about the t-shirt anymore, but he didn't want this, whatever it was, to be over. He didn't want the door to shut just yet. He wanted to know more about what lay on the other side. I know it's okay, but I want to do it. Come on, there's this door right over there. That's kind of weird, Sergio said, because it was. Well, here, I'm Gideon Burke. He put out his hand. Oh, maybe I should call your mom and ask her permission? I could explain what happened. Ask her permission? That's a funny one, Sergio thought. Nobody had been there to ask permission when he was living on the street before Nana found him. Was it a day? A week? A month? There was conflicting information. In his memory, there were only vague, shadowy images that might not even be real. People had quizzed him, had asked him so many questions that Sergio no longer knew what was a real memory, what was a dream, a nightmare, or somebody else's story he had picked up along the way. But one thing in his memory was certain. They had been together then, Sergio and his mom. No one disputed that. Living in a shelter in Albany. They shared a room. Was it white? Were there bunk beds? A dresser? Food came at long tables, didn't it? Plates divided into sections? Soapy clean water? Was there a playroom with toys? Dirt on the faces of the plastic people? Plastic action figures with missing eyes, hands, and a missing leg? He remembered that. Bent puzzle pieces, broken boxes, tiny square orange carrots, applesauce, white sheets, men yelling, milk in small containers, blankets that were thin and too small to fit around them both, so his mother tucked him in and curled around him. But the strongest memory that Sergio could attribute to either reality or desire was the smell of his mother, close to him, warming him, holding him, all the dark night. Until they found her dead, according to reports. Had there been a child with her? It seemed to have gone unreported. Sergio was picked up on Route 32 in downtown Albany, and nobody would say for sure how long he had been wandering. It was the 3-day hospital stay he remembered most. Clean sheets, warm water sponge baths, ice cream every night, and then they tracked down his maternal grandmother. The grandmother, as it turned out, lived in New York City, in Red Hook, Brooklyn, and had been searching for her daughter for 3.5 years, exactly Sergio's age. She never saw her daughter, but she held on to Sergio like a fierce hawk with tremendous talons. September 10th, 2001, 9:45 p.m., Columbus, Ohio. That evening, Nahid could not wash enough for wudu. Nori was already finished. She didn't need any help remembering. Face, hairline to chin, forearms, elbow to fingertips, right then left, scalp, and lastly feet. Right foot with right hand, left foot with left, toes to ankles. Nori ran water over the tops of her socks and called it a day. But Nahid couldn't wash long or hard enough. Before you can pray, you need to wash. You need to be clean, not just of real dirt, but of all the bad things you might have done with your hands, your ears, your eyes, your mouth, your words. Annoying, Eliza, annoying, Eliza. In her mind, Nahid could see Eliza's sad face while she was trying to eat her lunch in the cafeteria, even though Nahid hadn't turned around to see her once. All Eliza needed was one friend, and she could probably have handled the teasing, maybe even laughed it off. But alone, it was a tsunami. When Nahid crawled into bed that night, Nori was already asleep. Nahid would get her own room back when Uncle Aman and Aunt Judith left the next day, but for now her little sister occupied the trundle bed right below. Nahid's mother appeared in the doorway. "Are you all tucked in?" Nahid answered, and her voice cracked when she spoke. "Yeah, I am." Instead of moving away, her mother opened the door farther, letting light from the hall fall across the two beds, separating them right in half, light and dark. She stepped inside and sat down on the end of Nahid's bed, careful not to rustle Nori. There was really no need. Nori had been known to fall asleep right at the dining room table at late night suppers and stay sleeping while everyone cleaned up. Some trick that was. "What's wrong?" Nahid's mother asked. Nahid wanted to say nothing, because she wanted that to be the truth, and because the last thing Nahid needed was for her little sister to hear any of this. She said as softly as she could, "Something bad happened today." "Something bad?" her mother whispered back. She rubbed Nahid's feet under the blankets. "At school?" Only just as Nahid was going to tell her mother about how she had been mean to Eliza because she didn't want anyone to be mean to her. But then it had all gotten out of control and everyone started being mean to Eliza, too. Something entirely else came out of her mouth. "Two boys were teasing me about my hijab." "Oh, what did they say?" her mother asked. "Well, one of the boys wanted to know if it was hot under my scarf all the time, and the other boy said he thought I was bald in third grade, and that's why I had to keep my head covered." Her mother was quiet for a moment. "And what did you tell them?" "Nothing," which was sort of the truth. "Nothing? You know we've talked about this, Nahid. People don't understand, and it's your job to show them that you are proud of who you are, and teach them. Let them see that we are not like what they see on television and in the movies. You can do that, can't you?" Nahid nodded. She could do that. She just hadn't. Because it was easier to have the unwanted attention on someone else than to have to explain all the time and have people stare and ask more questions. "Sometimes I wish I didn't have to be Nahid the Muslim girl. I wish I could just be Nahid." Her mother laughed. "And who would that be?" Nahid shrugged her shoulders up to her ears. "Be strong, and don't let silly boys who tease you ruin your day." Her mother kissed her daughter on the top of her head. "There will be silly boys always. Their words cannot hurt you if you don't let them. If you know who you are. Now, tomorrow is Tuesday, a fresh start, right? And remember, I have to leave for work early. So get some sleep now, okay?" Nahid's mother lifted herself from the bed. "Good night, Nahid." "Good night, Mommy." And "Good night, Nori," their mother said. Nori didn't miss a beat. "Good night, Mommy," she answered. So Nori had been awake for the whole time. Figures. When their mother left the room, Nori sat up and leaned over her sister's bed. "Did they really think you were bald?" "Yes, isn't that hysterical?" Nahid held out her hand to her little sister. It was actually nice to be able just to reach out and hold her sister's hand while they lay in their beds. "With all your black hair?" Nori scooted closer and petted her sister's head. She took a thick strand and let it slip through her fingers round and round. "Nahid?" Nori said after a beat. "Yeah." "I'm sorry you had a bad day." "It wasn't so bad," Nahid said. "I can fix it tomorrow. At least I'm not bald." And both sisters dived into their pillows, trying to muffle their giggles. September 10th, 2001, 5:45 p.m., Shanksville, Pennsylvania. The ride home wasn't exactly the way Will had imagined it would be when he realized he had invited Claire to come bike riding with them. The boys rode 3 across, pedaling as hard as they could. The sun was already painting colors low in the sky. Will needed to get home before dinner or his mother would be worried, and then really angry when he showed up because she had been so worried. Alex had twisted his ankle. Ben had scraped his leg on a large stick that somehow found its way into the ring, and Will had bent his left pinky so far back he couldn't feel it anymore. He was going to pay the price for that for a while. Hopefully it would heal before basketball tryouts, but he felt most like an idiot for asking Claire to join him and then ignoring her completely. "She'll get over it," Ben told Will. When they heard a car behind them, they fell back into single line until it passed. "You know, Claire, she's not a girly girl. She's fine," Alex shouted up ahead. "We should have stopped," Will said, mostly telling himself. Ben sped up beside him. "You like her, don't you?" Will didn't need to answer. "Hey, man, I'm sorry," Alex said, dropping back on the other side. Ben and Alex got home first, and Will rode the last quarter mile by himself. He could see the lights on in the kitchen window. His mom was probably making dinner. The girls were probably watching TV or taking a bath. It wasn't so different, really, than it had ever been. Will's dad had sometimes been home for only 5 or 6 nights a month anyway, and yet everything was different. Will came to a stop at the end of his driveway. He looked up. It wasn't dark yet, but the sky had that hint of fall, of night coming early and taking the day away. If he got back on his bike now, he would be at Claire's house in 3 minutes and home again for dinner. He had no idea what he was going to do or say, or even if trying to talk to Claire was the right thing to do. He knew only that he had to do something, because doing nothing would feel worse. When he was 10, Will had had a real party at the bowling alley over in Somerset. It was one of the few times his dad was going to be around on his actual birthday. And besides, hitting that 2-digit number was a big deal, wasn't it? "Of course I'll be there." But that year was also the year that kids in his grade had shifted into different categories, some willing and others not so willing. There were smart and not so smart, higher math groups and lower reading levels, popular girls and the girls that sat alone, boys that could throw a ball and boys that constantly got beamed in the head with the volleyball, no matter how hard they tried to return the volley. In a class so small, it just looked all the more obvious who was who. I don't know what to do about my birthday," Will told his dad. "About that boy from school? Yeah, I don't really want him to come to my party." They were picking up sticks from the front lawn, sticks and branches that had fallen in the last rainstorm. When Will's dad was home, he wanted to do as many chores and repairs around the house as he could. Will always tagged along and helped. "Then don't invite him." "But he'll have his feelings hurt." Will threw one long branch into the woods behind their house and followed after his dad. "And we were okay friends last year." "Then invite him." "But I don't really want him to be there. He'll ruin everything. He's gotten so weird and loud about it, too." "Well, you've got to make a decision." "But how?" Will's dad was holding a bundle of woods and leaves in his arms. He looked like a tree himself, tall and strong, like nothing could ever hurt him. He knew everything. "Jump ahead in time and ask yourself, how will you feel if you don't invite him?" So Will closed his eyes, and he could imagine his party, everything going so well, all the presents he would get, the hot dogs and ice cream cake, and then everyone would go home, and it would have been a perfect day. "Okay," Will said. "I did. Great party." His dad went on, "And then how are you going to feel when you see this boy in your class the next day?" Will closed his eyes. He would go back to school, and this kid would be the only one from his class that wasn't talking about it. Maybe everyone else would be talking about their bowling scores or asking Will if he liked their gifts, or just raving about how much fun they'd had at his party. Everyone but that one kid. Just imagining that felt pretty bad already. "So, I have to decide by what will make me feel worse?" Will asked his dad. "Not what not what will make me feel better. His dad dumped his armload of branches onto a pile behind the shed. It's not about what makes you feel better or worse. If it's the right thing to do and you know it, you should do it. Even if my party sucks, Will said, but he knew the answer. And that is the end of the reading today and September 10th.